What happens when one of Britain's most respected royals comes face to face with television's most controversial interviewer? You won't believe what unfolds when Prince William sits down for what was supposed to be a dignified discussion about mental health awareness, only to find himself blindsided by accusations that would shake the very foundations of the monarchy. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds. Last night's episode of Piers Morgan Uncensored delivered television gold in the most explosive way imaginable. What started as a seemingly cordial conversation between the Prince of Wales and Britain's most polarizing host quickly descended into a verbal battlefield that left viewers stunned and social media erupting in disbelief. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince William entered the studio. Morgan, known for his shark-like instincts when it comes to celebrity interviews, had clearly done his homework. But nothing could have prepared viewers for the bombshell accusations that were about to be unleashed on live television. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us tonight," Morgan began with his trademark smirk, leaning back in his chair like a predator sizing up its prey. "I must say, it's refreshing to see a member of the royal family willing to engage in real conversation rather than the usual scripted pleasantries." Prince William, maintaining his composed demeanor despite the obvious provocation, replied diplomatically, "Well, Piers, I believe it's important to have open discussions about the issues that matter to people across Britain and the Commonwealth." But Morgan wasn't interested in pleasantries. Within minutes, the conversation took a sharp turn that would define the entire interview. "Let's talk about mental health then, shall we?" Morgan said, his tone shifting noticeably. "You've made it your crusade, haven't you? Very noble, very convenient timing, some might say." The prince's expression hardened slightly, but he maintained his royal composure. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Piers. Mental health affects millions of people. And if the royal family can help reduce stigma—" "Oh, I think you know exactly what I'm implying," Morgan interrupted, leaning forward with the intensity of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. "Isn't it fascinating how your passionate advocacy for mental health awareness coincided so perfectly with certain personal revelations within your own family?" The studio fell silent. Even the camera operators seemed to sense they were witnessing something unprecedented. Prince William's jaw tightened visibly as he processed Morgan's words. "I'm afraid I don't follow," the prince said carefully, though his voice carried a warning edge that any sensible interviewer would have heeded. But Piers Morgan had never been accused of being sensible. "Come now, Your Royal Highness. Do you really expect the British public to believe that your sudden interest in mental health advocacy wasn't directly motivated by the need to control a very specific narrative? A narrative involving your brother and his wife?" The accusation hung in the air like a loaded weapon. Prince William's composure, legendary even among royal watchers, began to show visible cracks. "That's an extremely serious allegation you're making, Piers, and it's completely unfounded," Morgan pressed on, emboldened by the reaction he was getting. "Is it though? Let's examine the timeline, shall we? Your mental health initiatives ramped up significantly just as certain members of your family began making very public claims about their own mental health struggles. Claims that painted the institution you represent in a rather unflattering light. You're suggesting that my work on mental health awareness is some kind of damage control exercise?" Prince William's voice had dropped to a dangerously quiet tone that those who knew him well would recognize as a storm warning. "I'm not suggesting anything," Morgan replied with theatrical innocence. "I'm stating facts. The timing is remarkable, don't you think? Almost as if someone needed to get ahead of a story that was about to break." The Prince of Wales sat perfectly still for a moment, his training in diplomatic restraint warring visibly with his natural instinct to defend his family and his work. When he finally spoke, his words were measured but carried an unmistakable edge of steel. "Let me be absolutely clear about something, Piers. My commitment to mental health awareness began long before any of the situations you're alluding to. It began when I served as a search and rescue pilot, when I saw firsthand the impact of trauma on both victims and first responders. It continued through my work with veterans suffering from PTSD. These are real people with real struggles, not chess pieces in whatever narrative you're trying to construct." But Morgan was far from finished. If anything, the prince's passionate defense seemed to energize him further. "That's a lovely story, William, very touching. But let's talk about more recent developments, shall we? About private conversations that may have been shared with journalists. About briefings against certain family members. The accusation was so outrageous, so far beyond the bounds of acceptable discourse, that for a moment Prince William seemed genuinely stunned. When he found his voice again, it carried a fury that viewers had never heard from a senior royal. That is absolutely outrageous. You're suggesting that I would brief against my own family? That I would use journalists to attack my own brother? The prince's composure was now completely shattered, his voice rising with each word. Morgan leaned back, clearly pleased with the reaction he had provoked. I'm simply asking questions that many people are thinking. Questions about loyalty, about family dynamics, about who might benefit from certain stories being told in certain ways. Those aren't questions, Piers. Those are accusations. Serious, defamatory accusations that you're making on live television without a shred of evidence to support them. Prince William was now leaning forward in his chair, his famous diplomatic restraint completely abandoned. The host continued his relentless attack. Evidence? Well, let's talk about evidence, shall we? About phone calls to newspaper editors? About strategic leaks? About a very calculated campaign to present one side of a very messy family situation. Stop. The single word from Prince William carried such authority that even Morgan paused. You will not sit there and accuse me of betraying my family. You will not suggest that I would use the press to attack my own brother. These accusations are not just wrong, they're despicable. But Morgan had tasted blood and wasn't about to back down. Despicable? Is that what we're calling accountability now? The British people have a right to know if their future king is capable of such behavior within his own family. Accountability? Prince William's voice was now shaking with rage. You want to talk about accountability? Let's talk about your accountability as a journalist. Let's talk about making serious accusations against a member of the royal family without any evidence whatsoever. Let's talk about your responsibility to the truth. The confrontation had reached a fever pitch that no one in the studio could have anticipated. Morgan, sensing he had pushed perhaps too far but unable to resist one final provocation, delivered his most devastating blow. The truth? The truth is that the public is starting to see through the carefully crafted image, William. They're starting to ask uncomfortable questions about what really happens behind palace walls, about who can be trusted, about who might be willing to sacrifice family loyalty for institutional preservation. That was the breaking point. Prince William rose from his chair with such sudden force that his microphone cord stretched taut. His face was flushed with an anger that transformed his usually composed features into something almost unrecognizable. This interview is over, he declared, his voice carrying the full weight of royal authority. Your accusations are not just wrong. They're beneath contempt. You've crossed every line of decency and journalistic integrity. Morgan, still seated but clearly realizing he had finally gone too far, attempted damage control. Now, William, I think we're having an important conversation here. No, the prince cut him off with finality. We're not having a conversation. You're making wild, unfounded accusations against me and my family. You're suggesting that I would betray my own brother for personal gain. That accusation is so far from who I am and what I stand for that I won't dignify it with another moment of my time. As Prince William began removing his microphone, Morgan made one last desperate attempt to salvage the interview. Surely you can see how these questions need to be asked. What I can see, Prince William said, his voice now deadly calm, is a man so desperate for ratings that he's willing to destroy his own credibility and attack a family's private struggles for entertainment. I came here tonight to discuss mental health awareness, to talk about helping people who are genuinely suffering. Instead, I find myself subjected to a character assassination based on nothing but speculation and malice. The prince straightened his jacket and looked directly into the main camera, addressing the audience with a dignity that made Morgan's behavior seem even more reprehensible by comparison. To anyone watching who struggles with mental health, please know that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. Don't let the kind of toxic behavior you've witnessed tonight discourage you from getting the support you deserve. Then, turning back to Morgan with undisguised contempt, he delivered his final words. As for you, Piers, I hope the ratings were worth your integrity. With that devastating parting shot, Prince William walked off the set, leaving Morgan sitting alone with the wreckage of what had become the most explosive royal interview in television history. The camera captured Morgan's stunned expression as he realized the magnitude of what had just unfolded. The silence in the studio deafening as Britain's future king disappeared through the studio doors, his dignity intact despite the vicious assault he had endured.